Word Domination has 2 to 4 supervillains spelling words to steal the world's greatest treasures. This copy was provided to us by Tim Fowers, who worked with this game's designer, Jeff Beck, in the past on Walkstar and Hardback. There's a cooperative variant where you're trying to steal the Eiffel Tower, but tourists get in the way and a guard is trying to stop your evil plan. I'm going to focus on the competitive game, but know that this is an option. Each player takes a villain card, a set of colored zeppelins, and draws a starting letter tile. Put the police token on the first round of the tracker. Depending on player count, you'll either have a 4x4, 5x5, or 6x5 grid of tiles letter side up in the middle. On your turn, you'll place the letter from your hand somewhere along the grid's edge, then spell a word by placing zeppelins. Your word must use the letter you placed. If no enemy zeppelins were on the letters already, draw a new letter to finish your turn. If an enemy zeppelin was already on the tile, remove it and give it back to its owner. If you used a black letter tile, these are arsenal abilities, and I'll talk about them soon. Anyhow, once you've displaced all enemies, check to see if you stole a tile. This is simple. You steal a letter once 2 of your zeppelins are on it. Take the stolen tile and 1 zeppelin back, then replace the stolen tile with another tile placed stolen side up. Now put your zeppelin on this stolen tile to show that you control it. You'll want to steal letters close together, as I'll explain later during endgame scoring. One last thing. Once you've stolen a letter, it goes in your play area. You can use these to help spell future words, but that's not their only purpose. Hard to use letters F, J, K, Q, V, W, X, and Z have special arsenal abilities that, if used, can give you a powerful boost or be devastating to opponents. For example, Jinx Cannon allows you to use the same letter twice in a turn. Vapor Shock Rocket removes an opponent's zeppelin from a letter even if you didn't use that letter. Your player area will always have a tile in hand and possibly some stolen letters. One side of your board is a reference for the arsenal abilities. The other side shows your supervillain's superpower used in the advanced variant. Spend the shown number of stolen tiles and trigger the superpower. On the other hand, you also have a weakness. If you stole a letter in your weakness word, you cannot steal any tiles on your next turn, although you can still spell words. At the end of the 6th round, add up the score. You'll get 1 infamy point for every stolen tile with your zeppelin. Each stolen tile in a group of 3 or more are worth an additional point per piece. Although non-stolen tiles aren't worth anything on their own, a letter with your zeppelin on it can bridge your stolen tiles into groups, earning you even more precious infamy points. There are a few other rules, such as helping your opponent spell a word, for a price of course, or forcing them to hurry. Some others are that you can't use the same tile more than once in a word, and you can't reuse variations on a word. Learn/learn, for example. Place zeppelins, spell words, and steal more tiles than your opponents, especially in groups. That's word domination. The growing letter grid and player areas mean that you should save word domination for dining tables, although you might be able to play a 2-player game on a large coffee table. If everyone gathers their bits while someone sets up the grid, setup is pretty quick, takedown is even faster. As long as players don't suffer from analysis paralysis, AP means you freeze when you need to make decisions. You can play this in under 45 minutes. You could play if you aren't a strong reader, but you won't win. I wouldn't recommend leaving the variable player powers and black tile arsenal abilities out, but it's a way to play with younger players. Otherwise, I'd save this for strong reading kids at least 8, but maybe older. The big reason why I'd save this for kids a bit older is the constantly changing board might just overwhelm some kids, possibly adults too. Grandma joined us for our 4th game of word domination. I started things off with vigilantes and then followed that with motives and screened. Grandma made reported, stealing the D I planned on using for my next word. At the end, we had our closest game yet. Grandma had 10, Mom had 12, Dad had 13, and I won with 15. I mentioned this in Family Facts, but do not play this if anyone in your regular gaming group has AP. A quick playing 35-minute game could stretch out far too long, and players might get bored between turns. Part of the reason they might be bored is this isn't a game where you can plan too much on your turn, especially as you get toward the end. The letters you wanted to use suddenly are stolen, and you'll have to rethink everything. This isn't bad if you're all quick players, but I recommend you think hard before picking up this one. The graphic design is good, but there are a couple things I would have liked to see. First, the variable powers are on the back of your player board. You'll be flipping this over a few times, especially in your first few games, because the arsenal abilities are shown on the other. I wish the arsenal abilities were on reference cards for each player instead. Second, the arsenal abilities are black tiles, the same color as stolen tiles. I wish they were a different color to stand out quickly. Third, Codenames has the words upside down as well, so players on either side of a table can easily read them. The style of some letters, especially when zeppelins are on them, mean you might mistake some for the other. If your game is already dragging because of AP, having to be like, oops, I thought that was an M, slows it down even more. Speaking of colors, none of us are colorblind, but even we have some issues in low light with the light and dark brown and light and dark green zeppelins. It seems like an odd choice. Okay, that's a lot of problems. So on to the good stuff. The game only lasts 6 rounds, and you're only able to steal in 5 of them. This adds a fun amount of pressure and means you'll sometimes sacrifice something to knock another player's zeppelin, or sacrifice one letter for another to create a bigger scoring combo. Clever stuff. The variable player powers, weaknesses, and arsenal abilities take a good game to a new level. You may want to trigger your power, but now have fewer letters in your stolen area to use in future words. The weakness is also something to keep in mind, especially depending on the round and changing game state. Again, clever stuff. I'll talk about this again in the next section, but as much as I love paperback and hardback, this can be played in half the time and is quite different from them. We weren't sure if this weird mix of area control, area majority, and spelling was going to work, but it really does. This is really good with 3 and 4 players. I haven't tried it with 2, but we have tons of games that work well at that count, so I'm not in any rush. With 3 and 4 though, I'll suggest this often. Word Domination is one of many word spelling games we have, joining paperback, hardback, and Poetry Slam. Poetry Slam is still my favorite, but it should be saved for large groups. Of the others, Word Domination edges paperback and is right up there with hardback. Word Domination isn't at all like those others in terms of gameplay, so it definitely has a place in our library. Not only is it different, but it's a lot of fun. I recommend checking it out.